I don't know about you, but I love searching for secondhand games. One, I always like getting a deal, and two, you never know what you're gonna find. Sometimes you find something that you never even knew existed. Like this. I recently ran across this Mousetrap Elefun and Friends edition. Now, I had already covered Mousetrap in a previous video, but this version's a little bit different. So let's see how it stacks up against the current 2021 edition and what they've done differently with the Elefun and Friends to make it stand out. Okay, this is awesome. So this is the 2014 Elefun and Friends edition of Mousetrap. Now we're going to see how it stands apart from the 2021 edition of Mousetrap, which has a more traditional setup for the trap itself. Now, Mousetrap was originally introduced by Ideal in 1963. It's gone through many iterations over the years. Arguably, one of the most notable is the 1986 Milton Bradley edition, which I do have a review of comparing it to the 2021 edition to see the differences. If you're interested in seeing that, there will be a link in the description for this video, so you can check that out when we're done. Now, I ran across this secondhand 2014 Elefun and Friends edition, saw how different it was from a traditional Mousetrap game, and I thought it would be really cool to take a closer look. So let's dive in, starting with the game box. Right away, we see something that's a little unique to this edition, and that's going to be that little plastic window there so you could see these highly detailed figurines when it was displayed in the shop. I mean, they're not super detailed, but when you compare them to a traditional Mousetrap piece, these are painted, they're colorful, their moldings are a little bit more intricate, so I think that these are really neat and definitely a draw. So it was a good idea to show off the game pieces. The art is bright and eye-catching when we flip it over. We have traditional fare for a board game. We see some kids enjoying their time playing, some close-ups of the game components, and a brief description of the gameplay. When we compare that to the 2021 edition, again, we don't see a window to show off any game components. We just see the titling on the front, but we see some really vibrant and inviting art with these nice little cheerful mice. When we flip it over, we see again some kids playing the game, as well as some close-up photos of the game's components and a brief description of what the game is like. Now, both of these boxes flip open on the end, and I advise getting some sort of container for the small parts to keep them secure, because over time this type of box can develop gaps and it can be pretty easy to lose parts. That being said, this game was complete when I got it secondhand. There is some mileage on the box, but the pieces were chunky enough that none of them seemed like they were in danger of falling out of the box. So there's a little bit of a win to the 2014 edition. Now let's get into the game itself. Now this one is unique again in how the game plays. We've replaced the die for movement with a spinner, and this dynamic kind of reminds me of Candyland because now the moves are determined by the color of space. You have three colors, purple, blue, and orange, so players spin this cheese wedge and they navigate their mouse to the corresponding color. Now, if they happen to land on a space that has a little red boot, that means that they activate the mouse trap. Now, the goal of this game is to be the first player to trap another mouse. Then the game starts over. So obviously this is designed to showcase the trap operating and let kids set it off as many times as their little hearts desire, which is great. That's the big draw to Mousetrap. So the gameplay in this one is relatively quick. You can see the game board is really short, actually. I guess I didn't count out the spaces, but for instance, there's only 3 trap activation spaces and there are 2 danger zone spaces. I mean, you're kind of in the danger zone out here if it wiggles just right, but realistically these 2 spaces are really where it's at. So this is designed again for kids to be able to have multiple playthroughs in rapid succession, and obviously showcases the neat little Rube Goldberg type machine, which why don't we go ahead and set it off just for funsies here. So again, and I love this, the board is this nice 3D plastic molded wheel of cheese. It's kind of weird that there's a jungle growing on the cheese. Seems a little bit questionable, but I'll allow it because it's fun. But with that, this 3D plastic board really adds some chunky stability. So again, going after a younger audience, that's pretty genius design. Now, To set off this trap, younger players are going to push down and make this boot kick this bucket, which will roll a bearing down the track over this crocodile's back into the giraffe's hands or hooves. The giraffe will nudge this ball bearing into the tub, which hits a seesaw down here and causes the hungry hippo to dive into the pond, which causes the purple monkey to spin down the tree and lower the trap. So quite a bit there. I wish I had like a fancy rhyme like the commercials used to have. Also, I want to point out that this blue elephant that's holding up the branch that activates the trap, this would be your representation of Elefun from the Elefun game. And the little orange hippo is a hungry hippo. So that's how they did the mashup between the three games, which I thought was really cute. It's a great way to market all three of them together. So let's begin. We'll set this off and watch this trap go. I love the spinning action of the little purple monkey. That is so fun. It's very simple. Now, interestingly enough, we use 2 metal ball bearings to run this trap, which in the 2021 edition, they had reduced that to 1 ball bearing. And I think that was just to kind of keep things easy to keep track of. But one thing that I admire is in this instance, and we'll see how it's different in the modern edition, but in this instance, this board was designed to catch these bearings before they roll off the table. They either remain in the giraffe's hooves or hands, or there's a little cup right here by the back of the seesaw that knocks over the hungry hippo that keeps the ball bearing there safely. So as you can see, I didn't lose track of them. I'm actually going to set this one aside so I don't get a false start here. The only thing that's kind of a pain is rewinding the purple monkey up the tree. He's got a little trigger right there that he catches on. There we go. But you know what? The funny thing is, it's a pain to get this cage off of this little pole here too, because the pole is jagged so that when the cage drops, you'll see in a minute, it kind of slowly comes down here, and that can make it really annoying to reset that trap. So this is actually less annoying, even though I still have to kind of wind it up, but it's no more laborious than doing that. So I really liked that. We should do that again. That was a lot of fun. I like the way this trap looks. There we go. So now here's the other thing is you can't really, I have this intent to kind of like flick when I see the boot and the little arrow here. I would think that it would be like a fast flick, kind of like the traditional game, but no, you're best to just hold this arrow and use it as a lever, which is fine for a little kid. Here we go, we got that spinny action. Ah, that's so great. That's so great. I really like how they reworked this to have bigger chunky pieces and have the game, like this Rube Goldberg type mousetrap piece seems much more reliable to me than a traditional mousetrap game, so we'll get to this in a moment. But this was a really masterful redesign to capture a younger audience. The chunky spinner with the cheese wedge is very charming. I absolutely love these little mice. Now these guys are named, every character on here is named. I can't remember all of them, but every character on this game board is named. But I like the mice. So we have Nacho, the orange one is Nacho, and the blue one is Sneakers, and the purple one is Pepper. So I thought that was neat. I love when they add that kind of stuff, that little bit of character to the game goes so far for me. It goes so far. So this is great. I love this little adaptation of Mousetrap. I think this is wonderful, and what a great way to be able to allow younger players to get their hands on a classic. Like I said, it's chunky, it's solid. This is the kind of thing that if it wasn't that I was a little worried about the ball bearings running away, I could see leaving this game out and set up very easily for the kids. And honestly, because of the retention system, as you can see, the hippo caught the ball bearing in that little cup, and the giraffe has it right in its paws next to the crocodile. I'll have to get a macro shot. This is a terrible angle for you to see that. The little ball bearing is right in here, but it does a good job of retaining them. So my complaints about this 2014 edition are very mild, and that would really just be, I really like the highly detailed figurines, but the lack of a base makes them just a little bit tippy. But honestly, they still, like if I set them down, like I'm just kind of going from dropping to reasonably setting them. And I mean, they still have a good enough weight that they generally stay on their feet. So it's not too bad, to be fair. And aesthetically, it's very nice. But, you know, I still prefer game pieces having a nice chunky base so they don't fall all over the place. But what a charming little iteration of Mousetrap. That's just great. That's just great. So let's look at the 2021 here right away. We do still have very nicely detailed mice. I mentioned in my other review that I like the detail on these mice. I like that they get the big ears. These are such a pleasure to grab and move around the board. These game pieces are very, very nice. Now, how the rules differ is in this Mousetrap, players roll a die to move their characters starting at the start and around the board. Now, they'll have to go around the board several times to win in most instances, because as they navigate the board, they will land on various spaces that will either allow them to collect a wedge of cheese, to steal a wedge of cheese, lose a wedge of cheese, or activate the trap. The goal is to be the first player who can assemble a full wheel of 6 cheese wedges. That player wins the game. So if you land in the trap and get trapped by another player, you lose all of your cheese wedges and have to start over. So again, this one was designed to set the trap off more frequently throughout the game than earlier iterations of Mousetrap. And some people like that, some people don't. Fans of the classic will remember that the majority of the early game involved building the trap itself as part of the gameplay, whereas the current version, the trap starts already assembled and the game is more focused on racing around the board and collecting cheese as a scorekeeper, as opposed to in the older versions, it was kind of a form of currency that you could use to set off the trap in the late game. I like a lot of the modern updates to the gameplay, to be completely honest, because I do think that the biggest draw to Mousetrap is how it blurs the line between being a board game and a toy. And obviously, people want to set that trap off. And speaking of which, let's have a look. I'll put one of my mice in the danger zone here, and we will set off the trap. Now, in this instance, I pull back this stop sign, which is going to knock this boot into the bucket. The ball bearing is going to go down these stairs, around this chute, into the bucket, which then the broomstick will lift up into the rain gutter, drop it into the tub. The tub will drain it onto the seesaw, which will launch the diver into the pan or the bucket or whatever you want to call that. Tub, I guess. You see, there was a commercial that said launch the man into the pan, and that always kind of throws me off. The one from the 80s. And then that will cause the cage to come down on the mouse. So let's have some fun here. I love it. I love these kinetic toy games. Now, as you're going to see, that ball bearing went right off the table because there is no retention for it on this design. So I will say bonus points to the 2014. If I wanted to set this off again, I'd have to either borrow one from the 2014 or dive myself under the table there and try to get that ball bearing, which I'm not going to do. But I do really think it's still just as charming as the original. Now, some people might note when you compare the original that this portion of the trap is a little bit different. There's a swing arm instead of what they used to call a thingamajig with helping hands. Watch my other review if you want to know what that means. But overall, I very much did enjoy reviewing the 2021 edition, and I think that these two really represent two different flavors of Mousetrap. But I am so enthusiastic for the fact that the Elefun and Friends edition was designed for a younger audience, and I think they really knocked it out of the park. This is fantastic. What a great design for the game. The durability is awesome. Really love it. Now, let's look at the rules real quick. This one is a single page fold out on bond paper. So it's unsealed, it's not shiny, it is printed full bleed. Obviously stood the test of time. It got a little crinkled, but it's held together very, very nicely. We have our neat little cast of characters with all of their names here. I'm trying to remember, yes, it's Jock Croc, and Chasin' Cheeky is the purple monkey, and Giraffe-a-Laugh, and Elefun, and the Hungry Hippo is just called Hungry Hippo. But nice set of rules, nice assembly instructions. Good job, Hasbro, good job. Now, this one I don't like as much because this is folded up like a Rand McNally map, and actually, when I was preparing for this video, just unfolding this again, I had accidentally torn a little edge. And I'm actually seeing there's another tear different than the one I recognize. Yeah, because I tore it here. This is nice, shiny, sealed paper. One sheet. I just don't like how it's folded. I don't like it when it's folded into quarters and you get these little corners here, because then unfolding it becomes a pain and those become excessive wear points. So the print will start to wear off and this will start to look ratty, and I'm not a fan. Now, it is nice, shiny, sealed paper, and I mean, the instructions were very nice, clear, easy to read, very well printed. So they're very good instructions, and they're definitely going to stand the test of time for the most part, but the fold is the big drawback with that modern edition. So that was a nice kind of deep dive into these two versions of Mousetrap. I'm curious. I know there are tons of others. I've had some people mention that there's one that has like a toilet bowl in the center of the board. I'm not sure which edition that was, but kind of a neat little divergence from your traditional Mousetrap Rube Goldberg design. But I'm curious what other editions are out there that maybe I'm not familiar with. If you have a favorite edition, comment below and let me know. Thanks a lot for joining me, and we'll see you next time.